Good afternoon, Miss Jim. We are from Group 3. We'll be presenting our answers for question 3. Before we present our answers, let me introduce my group members, which is Nur Darwisha Adrena, Nur Husna Maslina, Nur Alia, Nur Ain Batisha, and me myself, Nur Atika Aini. Our question is that, in what ways do procedural rules such as standing time limits and leave requirements affect access to remedies under Malaysian administrative law? Should these rules be reformed? Let's proceed to our answers. To answer this question, we need to explain the introduction first. Administrative law in Malaysia plays an important role in regulating the exercise of governmental and public authority and ensuring that decisions made by public bodies are lawful, fair, and reasonable. Individuals who are adversely affected by administrative actions may seek for remedies through judicial review, which serve as a mechanism for courts to supervise and control the exercise of administrative power. So, what is procedural rules? Procedural rules can be defined as the legal rules and requirement that determines how a person can bring the case to the court rather than deciding whether the person is right or wrong on the merits of the case. In administrative law, procedural rules regulate the process that an applicant must follow before obtaining judicial remedies against decisions or actions of public authorities. The requirement the applicants must satisfy before the court hear their claims for judicial review are standing, which is known as locus standi, time limits, and leave requirements. The purpose of procedural rules is to ensure the efficiency administration of justice, prevent grievous or admeritorious claims, maintain certainty in legal proceedings. What is remedies under administrative law? It can be defined as can be claimed by individual whose right has been infringed due to administrative decisions, also known as ubi uis ibi remedium. Where there is a right, there is remedy. There are two types of remedies, which is known as prerogative writs, which is also known as habeas corpus, consists of unlawful arrest, repetition of hearing on bail, delay detention, breach of procedural requirement. Another type of remedies is equitable remedies, which consists of certiorari, locus standi, prohibition, quo warranto, and more. However, these remedies is not automatic applied to an applicant, which required to comply with procedural rules before the court can consider their claims. Such procedural requirements include standings, which is locus standi, time limits, leave requirements, which play an important role in regulating access to judicial review. Moving on to another answers for my friend Husna.
In Malaysia, an application for judicial review is governed by Order 53 of the Rules of Court, ROC 2012. It is a two-stage process. The first stage is called the leave stage. It is essentially akin to a vetting process. According to the case of Asia Pacific Sunan Berhad and Tenaga Nasional Berhad, generally leave may be granted if the leave application is not thought of as frivolous, and if the leave is granted, an arguable case in favor of granting the leave sought at the substantive hearing may be the resultant outcome. If leave is granted, the claim proceeds to a full hearing. This is where the merits of the applicant's case are to be deliberated upon in the court. Leave acts as a filtering mechanism which ensures that only arguable cases proceeds and prevents courts from being flooded with frivolous claims. There are several characteristics of leave. First, leave is mandatory. Under Order 53, Rule 3.1 of the ROC, an application under this order shall not be made unless leave therefore has been granted in accordance with this rule. To put it simply, no judicial review can proceed without leave. These act as a gatekeeper before remedies like certiorari, mandamus, or prohibition can be accessed. Next is ex parte application. Ex parte application is a legal request made to a court by one party without notifying or requiring the presence of the other party. Order 53 Rule 3.2 of the ROC 2012 states that an application for leave must be made ex parte to a judge in chambers and must be supported by a statement setting out the name and descriptions of the applicant, the relief sought and the grounds on which it is sought, and by affidavits verifying the facts relied on. This makes the process faster but also means that the applicant must convince the judge upfront. Moving on to Attorney General's role, according to Order 53, Rule 3.3 of the Rules of Court 2012, the applicant must give notice of the application for leave not later than 3 days before the hearing get to the Attorney General's chamber. Notwithstanding the fact that an application for leave is an ex parte application, the AG has the right to be heard even at the leave stage. The next characteristic is very low threshold for leave. Referring back to the case of Asia Pacific Sungai Berhad, the court held that leave should be granted if the case is not frivolous. The applicant only needs to show an arguable case, not to prove the merits fully. The last one is justiciability requirement. The term justiciability refers to the suitability for or amenability to judicial review of a particular administrative decision or class of decisions. As in the case of Peguam Negara Malaysia and Chin Chi Kow, political questions such as foreign policy or dissolution of parliament are non-justiciable. This limit access where the court feel the issue is beyond their constitutional role. So how does actually leave requirement impact on access to the remedies under administrative law? For mandatory leave, it shows that remedies like statutory or mandamus are not automatically available. Applicants must clear a procedural hurdle first. This can delay or block access to remedies. Next is barriers to entry. Genuine claim can be dismissed at the preliminary stage if the threshold is applied rigidly. It also puts the burden entirely on the applicant to convince the judge upfront, which can disadvantage weaker the genuine claim. Other than that, courts may apply inconsistently the arguable case test, leading to unpredictability. It also have the compounding effect, whereas leave requirements combine with the standing and time limit, creating a triple hurdle for the applicant. Furthermore, applicant face additional expenses and procedural complexity before reaching substantive review. Lastly, for justiciable requirement, although it ensures courts don't overstep into political questions, it excludes certain grievances from ever being heard, limiting remedies.
Next, I will be explaining standing, also known as locus standi, and how it affects access to remedies under administrative law in Malaysia. Standing simply means the legal right of a person to bring a judicial review application before the court. In other words, before the court examines whether a public authority acted unlawfully, it first asks the question, does this person have the right to challenge the decision? So in Malaysia, standing is governed by Order 53, Rule 2, Subsection 4 of the Rules of Court 2012, where it states that leave for judicial review will only be granted if the applicant is adversely affected by the decision. This means that the applicant must show that the government's decision has affected his right or interest. Standing serves as an important purpose because it acts as a gatekeeper. It prevents people who have no real interest, sometimes called busybodies, from bringing unnecessary court actions. This helps save judicial time and ensures that only real and genuine disputes reach the courts. However, standing can also limit access to justice. If the court apply the rule too strictly, individuals or public interest groups may be unable to challenge unlawful government actions, even when those actions affect the wide. A good example is the federal court case of Majlis Pembandaran Pulau Pinang and Syarikat Bekerjasama Serbaguna Sungai Gelogo. So the federal court in this case adopted a strict approach and held that an applicant must show a real and genuine interest in the matter. This made it more difficult for public interest cases to proceed. Later, in QSR Brands Berhad and Suruhanjaya Security Malaysia, the federal court adopted a more liberal approach. The court held that The phrase adversely affected should be interpreted broadly, depending on the facts and justice of each case. This decision made judicial review more accessible and strengthened protection against unlawful administrative action. In my opinion, Malaysia should continue adopting this liberal approach. While standing is necessary to prevent frivolous claims, it should not become a barrier that prevents deserving applicants from seeking justice. A clearer definition of adversely affected and greater recognition of public interest litigation would improve access to judicial remedies while maintaining efficient court administration. In conclusion, standing plays an essential role in administrative law in Malaysia. It protects the courts from unnecessary litigation, but if applied too strictly, it may also restrict access to justice. Therefore, a balanced and liberal approach is the most suitable way forward. Thank you.
Time limits are an important procedural rule in Malaysian administrative law, particularly for application for judicial review. Under the Order 53 of Rule 3 Subsection 6 of the Rules of Court 2012, an application must be made promptly and in any event within 3 months from the date when the grounds for the application first arose. This requirement imposes both strict deadline and expectation of urgency on applicants seeking to challenge administrative decisions. The purpose of imposing time limits is to ensure certainty, finality, and efficiency in administrative decision-making. Public authorities must be able to rely on their decisions without the risk of indefinite legal challenges. However, despite these justifications, time limits can significantly affect access to remedies. Firstly, strict time limits may act as a procedural barrier to justice. If an applicant fails to file within the prescribed 3-month period, the court will generally refuse to grant remedies such as certiorari, regardless of whether the administrative decision was unlawful. For example, as shown in the case of Kelana Megah Development Sdn Bhd and Kerajaan Negeri Johor, the applicant's failure to bring the action within the required timeframes resulted in the court refusing to grant certiorari. This demonstrates that even valid claims may be dismissed purely on procedural grounds rather than being decided on their merits. Secondly, the requirement to act promptly further restricts access to remedies. Even if an application is filed within 3 months, it may still be rejected if the court considers there to have been unreasonable delay. This creates uncertainty for applicants as what constitutes promise is subjective and depends on the court discretions. Moreover, time limits disproportionately disadvantage ordinary individuals. Many applicants may not be aware of their legal rights or the strict deadlines involved. They may also require time to seek legal advice, gather evidence, or secure financial resources. As a result, deserving applicants may lose the opportunity to challenge unlawful administrative actions simply because they were unable to act quickly enough. On the other hand, time limits do serve important functions. They prevent stalled claims, promote efficient administration, and protect public authorities from prolonged uncertainty. Without such limits, administrative decisions could be challenged long after they were made, which would disrupt governance and legal stability. So all in all, while time limits are necessary to ensure efficiency and finality in administrative law, their strict application can restrict access to remedy. They may lead to unfair outcome where legitimate claims are denied due to procedural technicalities rather than substantive justice. Therefore, time limits play a crucial role but must be balanced carefully to ensure that they do not undermine access to justice.
The first recommendation is to adopt a more flexible approach to time limit. While this requirement promotes certainty and finality, the rule can result into unfair outcome where applicants have a genuine reason for the delay, such as a constrained financial situation or a genuine difficulty in obtaining a legal advice. The court should have greater discretion to extend the time limit where the delay is reasonable and no substantial prejudice is caused to the public authority. This ensures that deserving cases are decided on their merits instead of being dismissed. Next is the consistent in application of this requirement. This requirement is important to protect public authority from unnecessary litigation, but it may create uncertainty. Rather than abolishing a leave, the court should have applied a clearer and more consistent guideline when determining whether an applicant has established an agreeable case. This preserves a judicial efficiency while ensuring legitimate applicants are not rejected unfairly. Lastly, is to promote public awareness and access to legal assistance. The government and legal institutions should strengthen legal aid programs, public legal education, and access to affordable legal advice so that individuals can challenge unlawful administrative action within the prescribed time. In conclusion, procedural rules such as standing, time limit, and leave requirement are important because they promote efficiency, certainty, and prevent frivolous claim. However, when applied too strictly, they may unfairly prevent deserving applicants from obtaining a judicial review. Therefore, this rule should be reformed rather than abolished. A more flexible approach to time limit, consistent application of the leave requirement, and more public awareness would improve access to justice while preserving administrative efficiency. Ultimately, judicial review exists to uphold the rule of law by ensuring that public authorities exercise their power lawfully, fairly, and responsibly. Procedural rules should support this objective by facilitating rather than unnecessarily restricting access to effective legal remedy.